We've got a huge week coming for Palantir as they're about to report their Q2 2025 earnings on Monday, August 4th, after the market closes. This is a really important earnings for Palantir's stock price, and in this video we're going to talk about exactly what needs to happen inside their Q2 earnings report to keep the stock price momentum moving upward. We all know how hot Palantir stock price has been over the past couple of years, but year to date, it's up 105%, more than a double up. Over the past 1 year, it's up 523%. Over the past 5 years, up 1,576%, and even more than that. From the lows in January of 2023, the stock is up more than 2,300%. Long-term shareholders of Palantir have been rewarded massively, while shorts have been burned over and over and over again. I personally have a return on Palantir of 1,789% with the average cost per share of $8.17. So let's get into what needs to happen inside their Q2 report in order to keep this upward momentum going, and an important warning for all Palantir shareholders, specifically those who have bought the stock over the past 12 months or so. If you just recently entered the stock, this will be a very valuable video for you, and I think you should definitely watch all the way to the end, okay? I'm excited to get into this video, but first, if you're not subscribed already, go ahead and click that subscribe button. We have passed over 9,000 subscribers on the channel. I would love to get to 10,000 by the end of the year. So if you can click that subscribe button, it'll help us get to that goal even quicker. I appreciate you doing that in a major way. All right, let's jump into the video. In order to understand what's going to keep Palantir's stock price moving upward, we need to understand what led to this insane momentum in the first place. It's really 5 major things, okay? One is innovations. They rolled out a new platform called the Artificial Intelligence Platform a few years back, and they have expanded that platform in an insane way, and that has led to number 2, which is US commercial growth rates have been absolutely ridiculous. Palantir's US commercial revenue growth has exceeded 50% each and every quarter for multiple years now, with the most recent quarter, Q1 of 2025, being up 71% year over year, and their full year 2025 guidance represents a growth rate of at least 68%, and don't be surprised if they actually come in and raise that guidance number to 69%, 70%, or even higher than that inside their Q2 report. Also contributing to the stock price growth, Palantir got included in 2 major indexes, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100, which led to crazy momentum around the stock during both of those inclusions. And then the last 2 things that led to this insane rise were that they flipped to profitability in Q4 of 2022, and they've grown those profit numbers at insane rates over the past few years. And they're expected to grow GAAP EPS in this quarter by at least 33%, but I think that GAAP EPS number will be much higher than that, near 50%. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the last thing that's led to this insane stock price move is one of the most important ones, and it's their revenue growth acceleration over the past few years. Check out this chart right here. We see in Q2 of 2023, they had a low of 12.75% revenue growth. That's the lowest they've had in any quarter as a public company. But since that low, they have increased their revenue growth rate every single quarter for the past multiple years, up to 16.8, then to 19.6, then to 20.78, then to 27.15, up to roughly 30, then to 36%, and in the most recent quarter, it was 39.34%. Now, this brings us to the first thing we need to see to get Palantir stock price to continue to move up. If you didn't know, Palantir stock price has been pushed so far that the valuation is unbelievably high at this point. The GAAP trailing 12-month PE is a 669. This is in relation to the sector median of 27.39 GAAP PE on a trailing basis and 29.17 GAAP PE on a forward basis. Now, they should be commanding a steep premium over their peers because the growth story around Palantir is so much more compelling than almost all of their peers. They blow the growth rates of their peers out of the water on every single metric, on revenue, on EBITDA, on EPS, on free cash flow, on operating cash flow. They crush their peers on every single growth metric, so they should command a steep premium. But even with all that said, a 669 trailing PE is extremely, extremely high. Palantir is priced for perfection. In order for the stock price to keep moving up, they need a perfect quarter inside of Q2, inside of Q3, inside of Q4, and every quarter from here on out, really, in order for the stock price to continue and not fall off a cliff. So let's go back to those revenue growth rates and talk about what we need to see. We saw a 39.34% revenue growth rate in Q1 of 2025. We need higher than 39.34% inside of Q2 of 2025 to keep the momentum behind the stock. Let's look at what analysts are expecting from Palantir inside of Q2 as it relates to revenue. The revenue estimate is $939.47 million in Q2 of 2025. If we compare that to the prior year period, they had $678.1 million of revenue in Q2 of 2024. So if they just come in and they meet expectations and they report exactly $939.47 million of revenue inside of this quarter, that would be a 38.5% revenue growth rate. Although that's absolutely ridiculous, it is not an acceleration from the prior quarter. So we really need Palantir to beat on revenue estimates inside this quarter to get a revenue growth rate acceleration. They have a history of beating on revenue pretty much every single quarter. Over the past 8 quarters, there's only been one time where they missed revenue estimates from analysts. So the odds are that they will beat on revenue, especially seeing all the great press releases we got inside of Q2 with Palantir signing new deals in the government side and on the commercial side. Palantir over the past 4 quarters has beat on revenue by anywhere between 2.5% and 6.65%. So let's say they beat this quarter by 3%. If they had a 3% beat on revenue, that would mean they have revenue of roughly $967.65 million in the quarter. And if that was true, that would be a 42.69% rise in terms of revenue year over year. It would be a very meaningful revenue growth acceleration, and it would likely help keep the wind in the sails of Palantir's stock price. So that's one of the things we need to see inside this quarter. But like I said, we need to see a perfect quarter. So let's talk about the next thing, okay? EPS. They almost always beat on EPS, especially on a GAAP basis. So inside this quarter, they're expected to report 8 cents of EPS on a GAAP basis. If they report exactly 8 cents, that would be roughly a 33% increase from the prior year period. A 33% EPS growth rate is way lower than we've seen recently, so we'd like to see a beat on that by about 1 cent. If they beat by 1 cent up to 9 cents on the GAAP EPS, that would be about a 50% increase year over year from the 6 cents they reported in Q2 of 2024. So I expect at least a 1 cent beat on EPS up to 9 cents per share on a GAAP basis. Now, the next thing we need to see inside this quarter is for them to raise fiscal 25 guidance once again. Inside of Q1 2025, they raised revenue guidance. They raised U.S. commercial revenue guidance. They raised adjusted income from operations guidance, and they raised adjusted free cash flow guidance. We really need to see all those ranges get increased even just by a little bit inside of Q2 2025. This isn't necessarily needed from every single stock in order to have their stock price increase after earnings. But like we were mentioning, Palantir is priced for perfection, so they need a perfect quarter in order to keep the stock price momentum going. So now here's my warning for Palantir shareholders. I've been holding the stock for many years. I've seen many amazing quarters, but before they started this string of extremely strong quarters, I saw multiple quarters where Palantir was reporting GAAP losses. I was holding the stock at that time. I saw multiple quarters where the revenue growth rates were dropping each and every quarter, and they were dropping fast. I was holding the stock during that time. I've seen very positive stock price reactions after earnings, and I've seen very negative stock price reactions after earnings with Palantir. So what I've got to say after holding the stock for many years and going through many earnings cycles with Palantir is that if they miss on a single number inside this report, do not be surprised at all if we get a very sharp stock price drop after earnings. If they absolutely crush it on every single metric and they raise their guidance just like they have over the past 8 quarters, I can definitely see the stock price momentum increasing and the stock to continue to rip higher to 160, 170, or 180 in the short term. So yes, the upside possibility is there, but the downside risk is there as well with Palantir. If you're a long-term shareholder and you've been holding the stock for multiple years and your cost basis is super low like mine, below $10, this is probably not going to mean anything to you no matter what happens. If the stock price rips higher by 20%, cool. If the stock price drops by 20%, that's fine as well. But the people who are going to be really attached to the stock price movement is those who have been buying over the past 6 to 12 months with Palantir. And to anyone who fits in that category, just remember, don't sweat the short-term stock price movements all that much, especially around earnings, okay? Way more important around earnings time is that you look into the business fundamentals and you make sure that you like where Palantir is at from a business fundamental standpoint. Do you like where the revenue growth rates are? Do you like where the EPS growth rates are? The operating income growth rates? How's the US commercial growth looking? What do you feel is going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years with Palantir's business itself? Think about the business behind the stock. Don't get so wrapped up into the short-term stock price movements. If you want to hold Palantir for the next 3 to 5 to 7+ years, just worry about the business fundamentals. If you're still acquiring shares right now and you're buying in the $150 range, if we get a drop down to 140 or 130 or 120, that is a buying opportunity for you. I have not bought the stock in many years personally. If the stock rips to 180, I will be holding, not buying. If the stock stays around 150, I'll be holding, not buying. If the stock drops to 120, I will be holding and not buying Palantir. I am not in an accumulation phase with Palantir. It's already my largest position in my entire portfolio, mostly due to the insane rise that we've seen over the past little while. So those short-term stock price movements don't matter to me. What matters to me is the fundamentals. What matters to me is continued operational excellence from Palantir's management team, and that they're doing everything on the innovation side to continue their trajectory of becoming one of the most important software companies in the entire world. So don't forget that Palantir's management team is way more worried about the next 6+ years than they are about the next 6 months. Let me know what you think is going to happen with Palantir on Monday when they report their Q2 earnings, and let me know in the comments if you're still acquiring new Palantir shares, if you're trimming your position, or if you're just holding. I'd love to hear that in the comments below. Definitely one of my favorite parts of posting here on YouTube is having some conversation with you guys down there. I appreciate you being here in a major way. Thanks so much. Have a great night.